This is the third installment to a DTG STAR project on the language of God, Bible symbols. This time we're talking about Bible symbols and the cross. Now, in the past STAR projects on iniquity, the Trinity, the law, I have included the cross in those discussions and symbols, but today I'm going to deepen it. We're going to deepen the pot, and I pray that I'm able to make this, say this in such a way that it will make sense to you, that it can connect to you, because when we talk about the cross, this is the crux of our salvation. So we need to get it right. We need to understand what is being said. So as you listen to the study, again, if this is something that you're gleaning truth from, something that is blessing you and helping you, say so. Let's see it. I'd like to see a comment, a thumbs up, anything to show that you've been here, that you've looked at it, and you agree or disagree. There is something about the cross that the apostles teach that I've always wondered, how did they know that? How did they get this information? And I say that because you remember in Acts 17 how Paul would preach, and the Bereans would go search the scriptures to see if what he said was so. The only scriptures they had were the Old Testament. And I have been going to the Old Testament to try to prove some of this New Testament theology. And I have discovered that the Bible, of course, originally was the Old Testament. The Gospels were written to show how Christ, as Messiah, fulfilled the prophecies from the Old Testament. But the guys who wrote the New Testament are explaining the Old Testament with their understanding of it now. Now that they have lived through the life and death, resurrection of Christ, they are now preaching the truth with the Holy Spirit sent down from heaven. Where did they get this? Or let me rephrase. How could I use the Old Testament to prove what I'm saying? And I'm going to read Old Testament verses explained in the New Testament, and New Testament verses that I believe are in the Old. I believe the Old will bring this out. So one thing in particular I'm speaking of, Galatians 2:20, the Apostle Paul wrote, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. In the life I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Now, where does he get the idea? I am crucified with Christ. What part of me was crucified? Because I know all of my Christian life, I'm told about the cross, how he died to pay my sin debt, and this is supposed to deliver me from sin, yet it never did. There's just something lacking in my understanding concerning him saying, I am crucified with Christ. Where did he come up with that? He says it again in Romans chapter 6. So, what I decided to do for this particular study for this project was to look at Isaiah 53. Now remember, I am trying to use symbols to explain what happened at the cross. And there are two things in Isaiah 53, two statements made, that I want to look at. The first one is Isaiah 53, verse 5. He was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquity. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we're healed. What do we mean, the chastisement of our peace? Because if you read this in the NIV, it says something entirely different. The NIV, instead of using the word chastisement, uses the word punishment. The punishment that brings us peace. The punishment that we would have peace. And that gives me a completely different picture of what's going on at the cross. Was Christ being punished for us? See, that's another thing. I was told that the stripes on his back were what I deserve. I deserve to be whipped like that because I'm a sinner. And yet, I've got verses like John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. And somehow that didn't jive with me. He's going to punish his Son so that he doesn't punish me. He's going to allow his Son to be killed so I don't have to be killed like that. That's basically the way I was raised. Thoughts like that. But when you look up this word chastisement, the chastisement or the punishment, it isn't either one of those. The word is instruction. The instruction of our peace. The word peace is shalom. And it means better would be a completeness. And I would challenge you on Isaiah 53:5 that it is the instruction that makes us whole. It's the instruction to lead us into wholeness. How in the world are we seeing instruction that leads to our peace? Another one in Isaiah 53 is verse 10. It pleased the Lord to bruise him. He has put him to grief. When you make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed. Now let's stop right there. What does he mean, I'll see seed, or he will see seed? If I make the soul of Christ an offering for sin, I'll see seed. Never made sense to me. Whether I see seed or God sees seed, whoever sees seed, I didn't know what they were talking about. When I look at this, when you make his soul an offering for sin, and you take that to the ancient Hebrew, you'll discover the word is simply guilt. When I make his soul guilt, I will see seed. Now, if that doesn't wake you up, want to hear more, if that doesn't do something to you to say, okay, well, what does it mean? We're going to explain these two things using symbols. The symbols that were portrayed at the cross. See, the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 5 said that he who knew no sin was made to be sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God. Well, how do you take somebody who hasn't sinned and make him to be sin? And in the process, you're instructing us unto completion. Remember in 1 Peter, the completion, the aim of your faith, the completion of your faith is the salvation of your soul. So somehow, you see, in this cross, I am going to be instructed unto completion. My faith will be instructed unto completion. And when I make his soul guilt, and I say, well, that's guilt. That's what guilt is. Then I'll see seed. So, where do we go with this? How do we deal with what is stated in Isaiah 53? Well, I guess the question would be, how does Christ become me? Where Paul can say, I am crucified, Christ. Romans 6, unite with him in his death. How do I do that? How does that even happen? Well, there is a symbol we're going to look at. And I want to ask you to turn Psalms 19. In Psalms 19, verse 4, their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them has he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. Who else is referred to as the bridegroom? Jesus Christ. John the Baptist referred to him as the bridegroom. The bridegroom has the bride. The S-U-N is a symbol of the S-O-N. So, let's look at the cross, and let's apply the first symbol. When Christ was on that cross, the 6th hour, from the 3rd hour to the 9th hour, he was on the cross. On the 6th hour, the sun is blotted out. The sun is a symbol of Christ. But when you blot the sun out, I think the Lord was telling us, this is no longer a symbol of my Son. This is a symbol of fallen humanity. Why? How could this be? Because a crown of thorns is a symbol of guilt. Remember, if you make his soul guilt, that crown of thorns is a symbol of guilt. It represents the thoughts you have that just prick your thinking when they come into your mind. It's the guilt and the shame that you feel. The stripes on his back are not what any of us deserve. It's what has happened to us all of our lives when people have said things and done things to wound us. And maybe some of these things were so bad we couldn't forgive it. And so we still have that stripe. Also, the nakedness is an exposing of self. In other words, you act, you say, you do things according to your own will, according to your own iniquity, your own thinking. And you're exposed. You're naked. You're not clothed with the righteousness of Christ. So here we see 4 things: crown of thorns, stripes on the back, nakedness, and no light. The sun is blotted out. On that cross, Christ was portraying man who doesn't know God. What he is showing you is the soul of all of humanity. All of humanity has guilt and unforgiveness toward others. We live in our nakedness, and we have no understanding of God, no light. So when I come to the cross and I make his soul guilt, I will see seed. That seed goes back to Genesis 3:15. The seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. The seed of the serpent is iniquity. The seed of the woman is truth. So when I make his soul guilt, using the symbols that God gave us to see on the cross, to see what you can't see in your own heart. When I make his soul guilt, I will see seed. I will see iniquity. The seed of the serpent. Remember, Christ told Nicodemus, just like the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, as Moses lifted up the serpent, so must I be lifted up. Well, the serpent is the author of your iniquity. So when I make his soul guilt, I see the seed of my problem. My problem is iniquity. So now I can look at this and say, well, now wait a minute. The instruction that makes me complete is on him. There are 4 things he said after the sun was blotted out. Remember, the sun is out, he's on the cross, and as the Son of God, he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He also told the thief on the cross, this day will you be with me in paradise. He then addresses Mary and John. Woman, behold your son, behold your mother. But then the sun goes out. The sun's blotted out. He is no longer as the Son of God, symbolically. He is fallen man. What is the first thing he says when the sun is blotted out? My God, why have you forsaken me? Remember, he now is beginning to portray a man who doesn't know God. He's wearing his crown of thorns. He has his stripes, the nakedness, now the darkness. My God, why have you forsaken me? Next thing, I thirst. What if I were to say, you realize you're forsaken of God, and you cry out for a deeper knowledge of God? I thirst for truth. Next, it is finished. He meant, as a fallen man, I'm not going to try to fix this myself anymore. I've tried alcohol, I've tried drugs, I've tried sex. Why have you forsaken me? I'm thirsting now for truth, and it's finished. My struggle to do this myself is over. Next thing, into your hands I commit my spirit. Again, he is portraying somebody who doesn't know God and what he has to do to be made whole. That's what you have to do. You give up doing it yourself, and you make a decision. Into your hands I commit my spirit. It's a perfect picture of man, of the problem that we have in iniquity. And remember, he gave himself to redeem us from all iniquity. He redeems you from iniquity by you understanding the cross and being baptized into his death. That's what's happening right now. Before you go get in the water to be literally baptized, you have to be told something. This is your baptism, using the Word of God, the water of the Word, to immerse you into the death of Christ. He is showing you iniquity is our problem. Iniquity has caused our guilt. It's causing our unforgiveness. It's manifest in our nakedness. It shows we have no understanding of God. How do I get past it? Father, I feel forsaken. I'm thirsting now. I want some answers. I ask you to help me, dear God. I'm tired of doing this myself. Into your hands I commit my spirit. In so doing, we experience salvation. And Paul can say, I am crucified with Christ. See, for a long time, when I looked at the cross, and I thought, well, what is this death of my old man? And I realized my old man is the way I perceived God. As long as you think Christ is being punished in your stead, then you're seeing God entirely different. See, God is love. Love does not make a record of sin. God was not having this cross happen to change how he sees you. He had this happen to change how we see him. That sacrifice is not something you come and you bring to God. Oh, the death of your son. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son to you. Because according to Isaiah 53, he shows you the seed of your problem, which is iniquity. And he shows you how to be healed, how to be instructed unto completion. God is love. Love doesn't make a record of sin. It never has. And I know that this study, I pray, would open up 1,000, 1,000,000 doors and questions to be answered. And I pray that God will give you those answers like he has given to me, like he has given to people in our church who are seeking to overcome sin. And remember Titus again, 2:14, he gave himself to redeem us from all iniquity. Are you redeemed from all iniquity? If you think God is the angry God, you're not redeemed from all iniquity. That cross was a tool to bring us unto salvation, being saved, redeemed from twisted thinking, which changes our lives and sets us free from sin.